Very good morning to you, and thanks for coming into your Power2X Subgroup webinar. I'm Jaya Calder from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and I'm running this morning's webinar. Before I pass on to my colleague Paul O'Brien, I'd just like to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're recording this morning's session, and also, although you've come in as an attendee, you're automatically muted. Please, you'll see a question box. Please use that question box throughout the session and we will pick up the questions at the end. So let's get started and over to Paul. Paul.
Morning, everyone. Right, so thanks for attending our next Power2X subgroup webinar. And we'll just go over what we're going to be discussing this morning. So the introduction is just this part at the moment. Next up will be Neil Wilkinson from Aker Solutions, one of our co-chairs. It will be both co-chairs that will be speaking this morning, with John Sinclair covering the future hydrogen calls later on. John is from Bilfinger. And the results of the member poll and the forward plan is what Neil will be covering. Then I'll be going over a quick run through of projects that are currently ongoing in Scotland, looking at all the hydrogen projects, and then homing in on the ones that are to do with hydrogen itself. And then we'll end up around about 10:40. We want to have a good time for discussion at the end, because we want your feedback about next steps, and particularly when we're talking about the hydrogen calls. So without any further ado, Neil, if you'd like to put your camera on, and we'll move on to the first presentation.
Hi everyone, yes, my name is Neil Wilkinson. I work for Aker Solutions in our renewables space. I work in customer engagement and business development. I look particularly at wind, but also hydrogen, carbon capture, and decarbonisation of oil and gas. So quite a few of the topic areas that the Power2X subgroup focuses in on. As Paul rightly mentioned, I'll be discussing our results from last week, sorry, not last week's, but the last Power2X webinar that we held a month or so ago. In that session, we actually had fantastic engagement from well over 60 people. We had an online poll session where we came to all of you and asked a number of critical questions to help us further develop the Power2X subgroup, to drive what we want to do in the next few webinars, but also drive what will be happening over the next 6 to 12 months. We want to make sure that not only is this an enabling subgroup, but we also want to make sure that our members get the most out of that as well. So next slide, please, Paul. Yes, so as I said, we at the end of our last session, we held quite an engaging session around these 5 key areas of focus. Our questions were around our main reasons for joining the subgroup, whether it be business development or knowledge sharing. We talk around the main challenges for growth, whether it's incentives or whether it's access to projects. We then talked about our main drivers for growth and what are the most relevant topic areas. So from a high level was that offshore generation, onshore generation, energy storage and the like. And then finally, and quite importantly, we want to talk about what the subgroup will focus on moving forward. As I said earlier on, what we want to do is make sure that we get the most out of this group moving forward, and where possible, start enabling projects, start enabling consortia for us to drive forward and face the challenges that face the industry across hydrogen, oil and gas, as well as the wind industry as well. Next slide. Yeah, so just a quick overview of the results from each of the questions. As you can see, each question is multiple answers, so the percentages are based on the amount of people that voted for each particular answer. For the first question, of course, what was our main reason for joining the subgroup? And quite importantly there, business development, 78% of you who voted for that business development opportunity. And this is key and critical for the Power2X subgroup moving forward. As I mentioned a couple of times already, we want to make sure that we're enabling projects. While access to new projects and knowledge sharing is vital, we want to ensure that our supply chain members and our clients and the OEMs and the technology providers and the industry bodies as well all have an opportunity to grow their own sectors and grow their own businesses and enable Scotland and indeed the UK as well to reach the hydrogen targets and wind targets for 2030, 2040 and 2050. Next were our main challenges for growth in the sector. So business development is a common theme right across all of these answers, and engagement with you all. But access to projects, obviously, it ties in very well with what was mentioned in the previous question. In order for us to grow, we simply need more projects. In the hydrogen space, we are still in our infancy. We're still at that almost tipping point, whether we'll see large-scale hydrogen production or not. There's a lot of ifs, there's lots of buts. But what we need to see is access to more projects. And over the coming months in these webinars, you'll see a lot more, many examples of projects. We'll have presentations around them. And then if you, as a company or a technology provider, have projects that you're looking at and you wish to share in this Power2X subgroup, please feel free to get in touch or put in the chat function and provide us some details, because this is exactly what the subgroup aims to bring about. Of course, incentives, capex investment, and access to international opportunities are also very important, but it's just accessing projects here in Scotland and the UK that are a high particular focus at the moment. So on to 3, and how important are the following to realising our ambition. Regulation and legislation and funding are very important, and we will touch upon these in future webinars moving forward. But what is quite telling, and I've previously touched upon the fact that business development and access to projects is a common theme across all of the answers actually that we've seen today. This one here in particular is a very, very good focus area for us moving forward. If we can come together as partners in a consortium to develop some of the key challenges and the key technological challenges facing us as an industry, it's great if we can come together. And if there's access, if there's projects that you have in the pipeline that you require or you think may benefit the creation of a consortia, then feel free to also get in touch with the Power2X subgroup, because this is something that we're really keen on doing and driving forward in the following years and months as well. So question 4 was around Power2X and what areas of growth are most relevant to your companies specifically. So we talk about high level technologies here around energy storage, oil and gas, electrification, hydrogen offshore and onshore, as well as hydrogen storage. And as you can see, there's a great spread of engagement there, which shows that we have multiple industries on the call that are willing and ready to engage. Offshore focus, of course, is of high relevancy. We have the oil and gas industry in this subgroup as members. We have the wind industry and we have hydrogen, and most of those all overlap in the offshore space. Especially when we look at hydrogen for the creation of green hydrogen, so electrolyzers offshore and onshore, it all comes usually from a large scale generation of wind power offshore. So that's quite telling. Next slide, please. Yes, so finally, and most importantly for us as subgroup co-chairs, was to look at what you guys as subgroup members and those engaged, what you expect for the subgroup moving forward. We briefly touched upon consortia and business development. So it's quite keen, and it's quite telling as well through the engagement that we've had with you and following conversations since last month's webinar, that unlocking those regional and global opportunities are a critical focus, and then potentially coming together as a consortia as well. So there's 2 strands that we're looking at. It's knowledge sharing first and foremost as well, because we need to know more to engage and to grow our projects. And then secondly, of course, is unlocking those opportunities. So over the coming months, and as our webinars progress and our engagement with you all continues, in particular in the knowledge sharing aspect, we hope to bring to you access to more projects with regards to presentations from a number of clients. We want to bring the technology providers in, the OEMs that have the new cutting edge technology, whether it's the new electrolyzer developments, whether it's higher powered wind, or it's floating substructure design, or whether it's direct air capture, ammonia production. There's so many areas of focus that we can look at here in the Power2X subgroup, and we want to bring those to you. And if you want to come and showcase your technology and your projects, then come forward, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. We also want to engage internationally. So, and I've got an example there, WAB, which is the industry body for offshore wind and wind in general in Germany. And we're hoping to have some collaboration with them in the very near future, for which you're all invited as well. So collaboration internationally is key. And when we look at the demand centers for hydrogen moving forward, Germany, of course, and other areas in Europe are very high demand centers for hydrogen, and provide us an excellent export route for hydrogen moving forward. And we definitely want to engage. More project presentations. Again, I briefly touched upon technology challenges and SME presentations, and we hope to also have some engagement from the industry bodies, Opportunity Northeast, Subsea UK, OGTC, and other industry bodies, and get them engaged with you all too. And then finally, and again, very importantly, is unlocking the opportunities moving forward. So we want to be able to bring to you opportunities for you to be engaged to develop your own businesses. So that's access to potential Meet the Buyers webinars and meetings. This is something that already happens in the wind industry. There's no reason why that cannot happen as well in hydrogen and other aspects of as we move forward. Again, we spoke about the access and international collaboration, and we want to bring more of that to the forum as we move forward. And then really quite their main focus, I guess, is bringing together opportunities for us to develop opportunities as a consortium. So you'll see in Norway projects like the ZEEDS project, which Aker Solutions is actually part of, where the consortia came together, raised the challenge of offshore decarbonisation of the shipping industry, creating hydrogen hubs, or almost like hydrogen fueling stations for shipping offshore. They came together with the challenge, and then went to industry, went to the government with that idea to gain funding. This is something we can look at here. We don't necessarily need to wait for the funding calls to come out from government. We can progress a consortium potentially to come together and highlight some of the challenges, demonstration projects, come together as a team of projects and companies to deliver a solution. So we're looking at that, and then we're looking at the other areas of focus as mentioned. And then quite importantly, at the moment in the wind industry specifically, there's a lot of supply chain databases out there that allow us as companies to showcase our experience. And then when clients come looking for expertise, the databases are there, and there is one ongoing at the moment for hydrogen. After my discussions with Paul over the last weeks, this is something that's ongoing at the moment, and we're engaged on. So expect some news on that coming forward as well. So thank you. That's our, I guess, our engagement results and our way forward. And I'll pass now on to Paul, I believe.
Thanks, Neil. Right, bang on time. In fact, a couple of minutes before it, so fantastic. Right, so now I'm just going to cover the hydrogen landscape in Scotland, what is actually going on at the minute, looking at projects that have been highlighted in the Scottish Government's report in December in particular. This is no sooner written, this presentation, that it's out of date. There's literally announcements every day. But the December paper set out a target for Scotland to deliver up to, well, actually 5 gigawatts by 2030, and it's 5 gigawatts of hydrogen generation. Now, it doesn't say whether that's blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, but of course, linked to offshore wind, we're only interested in hydrogen of one colour, and that's green. At the same time, the Scottish Government have also announced a further ambition to have, by 2045, 25 gigawatts of hydrogen generation. Now, that's a huge number, and it would require a huge amount of offshore wind to help deliver that. So these are very important figures for the wind industry, as well as for the Scottish Government to set out ambition of such scale. At the same time, we've already got a challenging 40 gigawatts by 2030 in the wind industry, but this adds almost a much larger challenge in going beyond that figure and adding hydrogen generation projects to the mix as well. We're currently looking at ScotWind, which is on the back burner just now, while Scottish Government and Crown Estate Scotland rethinks the process, given the huge amount of money that has been paid for the licenses in Round 4 down south. This ScotWind, which we were hoping to see being closed by 31st of March and then announced the winners later in the year. We don't know at the moment how long it will be delayed, as things have to be rethought on that one because of the huge amount of money spent on projects down south. Scotland is quite unique in the UK as having specific drivers for why offshore wind companies would be looking at something else besides electricity. Connecting to the grid is an issue in Scotland just because of our weak grid infrastructure in certain places. We're very strong on the East Coast, but as we move away from the East Coast into the north, out into the islands and on the West Coast, we face bigger challenges with delivering the grid to these new sites in the ScotWind. So that coming with that is also the challenge that the transmission charging in Scotland is the highest in the UK. So there are some very strong reasons why our offshore wind developers, most of whom are in the deep wind cluster that are looking at ScotWind, are also interested to understand what the opportunity is around hydrogen generation or potentially hybrid projects, producing electricity and hydrogen. And we need to understand where the market will be developing. Neil mentioned Germany. That's a big focus for our export attention at the moment, and it will continue to be moving forward. As we just move on, that showed a number of the report in December showed a number of scenarios looking at what could happen in Scotland. Now, for offshore wind, what we're looking at is the green export scenario, because that offers the largest opportunity to our industry to rival the scale, actually, of gas from the North Sea at its height. That scenario looks at a huge export potential of 94 terawatt hours going into mostly Northern Europe, but the European community in general, as a target market for green hydrogen production from Scotland. So it's very important to understand the market drivers that will sort of drive these large scale decisions. Now, Scotland is very active in production of hydrogen projects. This is from the December report, and it's just a quick visual overview of where the projects are, what type of project they are. But for us, there's 38 projects listed there. For us, the ones that have got the most relevance, I would say, to offshore wind are the 4 that are listed there. The Acorn project, which is looking at blue hydrogen production and injection up to 2% into the gas grid. Dolphin, of course, from one of our members, ERM, that project is looking at a floating wind platform which will produce the hydrogen and pipe it back to shore. And of course, they've picked Aberdeen as the nexus of where that will come ashore. The H100 project from SGN, which has been given the go-ahead in Fife, will be the first 100% hydrogen network to be delivered to homes anywhere in the UK. So it's 100% green hydrogen. It will be coming from the offshore wind turbine, the Leavenmouth turbine, which is literally just offshore in Methil. If any of you have seen it, there's actually a drawbridge linking it to land, but it is actually an offshore wind turbine, a 7 megawatt machine, which is originally the Samsung demonstrator. And the other one is the Future LTS Network project. Now, Acorn, if you're not familiar with it, I've sort of given the game away already about what it's actually there to do, but they are also looking at a plan to supply 100% hydrogen to the Aberdeen gas grid, but that's out beyond 2030. But initially, it will be looking to split natural gas into hydrogen and CO2, but with the CO2 sequestered in one of the aquifers, either out in Goldeneye or potentially the Miller Field. That's what's been looked at the moment. We have one member involved in that, which is Total, but Pale Blue Dot and SGN are sort of leading on the development of this project. Now, it's the reason why we would be interested in this project, because St Fergus is a nexus for North Sea gas coming ashore and going into the grid. There's a lot of processing done on the site. There's 5 owners on the site. It's ideal if you start to look at access to the gas infrastructure and offshore wind. You see there that there is a number of potential offshore ScotWind sites which could be linked back to St Fergus. There's enough land, you see in the picture there, that there's plenty of land round about the gas infrastructure as it stands at the minute to add other things. So the LOHC for liquid organic hydrogen carrier to export hydrogen or remove hydrogen about, potential green ammonia, possible methanol for using green hydrogen and the CO2 capture. There's a number of almost chemical plant type activity that could be put on that site. And it's also flagged up as a site for the European Hydrogen Hub, which is also shown there. And OGTC are working on a project at the moment looking at how St Fergus can engage with the other, I think there's now 11 transmission gas companies in Europe looking to deliver this huge hydrogen hub project. So that's why we're interested in what's going on at St Fergus. It's not the blue hydrogen that's of interest. It's more about infrastructure, the potential to export it from possibly Peterhead, which is nearby, as port infrastructure. So there's a lot going for that whole Acorn project as far as our side of it is concerned from offshore wind. Now, it's not the only one. I mentioned Dolphin earlier. So Dolphin have got big ambitions once the prototype is up and running to then look at much larger projects. They're looking at a 10 megawatt system up and running by 2027, and then beyond that, scaling up to 100, and then in 2034, if memory serves me right, they are moving on to a huge project looking at up to 4 gigawatts of offshore production of hydrogen, and all of that coming back potentially into an Aberdeen hydrogen hub. The H100 project I'd mentioned, that's just a graphic showing you how they intend to deliver it. So they've been given the green light by Ofgem. So as I say, this will be the first hydrogen storage demonstration facility using 100%. Phase 1 will be to about 300 homes in Fife, and phase 2 could potentially increase it to 100%. These projects are looking at the demand side. So this is where the opportunity lies for hydrogen in the future, potentially into the gas grid, but also SGN are looking at basically 100% hydrogen operations in their own gas network. So these are where Aberdeen, for instance, could be completely served by hydrogen, 100% hydrogen gas grid, but not connected to the main transmission system. So you would get nodes, cities, towns, where they would be transferred over to 100%. The Leeds project down south is exactly that. They're looking at turning the whole of Leeds gas grid over to 100% hydrogen. And we're very interested in that project, even though they are still talking about using blue hydrogen to a certain extent. CCS is still to be a proven technology when it's linked to the production of hydrogen. So jury's out in that one, but we'll just keep an eye on it and see how it develops. On that, the LTS network, future LTS project is looking at the use of the local transmission system. That's what the LTS is. SGN controls over 3,100 kilometres of it in Scotland. So we're very interested in them being a future partner for any of the projects looking at injection into the gas grid or 100% hydrogen gas grids. This is the kind of technology that will be required to deliver the transmission and local system. Previously, we worked with the OGA to look at the energy transition opportunity, and hydrogen, of course, featured in that. This is from a report from the OGA going back a year now, just over a year. And even in that report, they are highlighting the green opportunity for hydrogen hubs to be developed in conjunction with where the gas infrastructure was. So Shetland was highlighted, Orkney, and in the Moray Firth area, the potential to reuse gas infrastructure to deliver hydrogen is not lost in the OGA, and its opportunity to take part in the energy transition is something that we shouldn't be missing, because the offshore wind is going to play an important part in the electrification of the oil and gas industry in Scotland. So the Orion project, we recently had a webinar where we delved deeply into the Orion project in Shetland, and it's looking at both blue hydrogen from natural gas at the Shetland gas plant, and also green hydrogen from the NE1 site, which is just off the east of Shetland, and is a ScotWind site, which is potentially up to 2 gigawatts. Now, we're proposing that that lends itself, rather than connecting to the grid, which would require a further connection from Shetland to the mainland and is possibly quite expensive, it would be an ideal site to look at large-scale production of offshore hydrogen with delivery back to shore, or the electrolyzers onshore on Shetland, and with a cable, a local cable from NE1 into electrolyzer banks based on Shetland. So it's our own energy island project, which we've been talking about. Other countries such as Denmark are talking about energy islands, artificial ones. So we've got a ready-made one. We just need to find ways to tap it. Cromarty is the other hydrogen hub that's on the go at the moment. They're looking at demand. They're very interested in finding out from the local companies, local industries. They're talking to the airport, they're talking to Highland Council, the aquaculture industry, and particularly the distillers, which will probably be a first mover for 100% hydrogen to the distilleries. And they're looking at that aggregated demand and then looking at offshore wind as the supplier of the green hydrogen with electrolyzers onshore. Aberdeen has continued its ambition in hydrogen. The hydrogen bus project is very high profile. It's now going to see the first double-decker hydrogen buses anywhere in the world. A fleet of them will join the existing 10 buses. And they're also looking at transitioning Aberdeen to a hydrogen hub. I mentioned earlier, Dolphin is looking to tap into that plan, and they want to supply hydrogen into that future Aberdeen hydrogen hub. So Aberdeen have got big ambitions to stay ahead of the curve, and they are one of the leaders in the transition to hydrogen. So just to summarize, we've got a massive amount to deliver by 2045. If we're going to deliver the 25 gigawatt target that the Scottish Government are talking about as an ambition, we would need huge projects to be delivered. So we need to move away from where we are at the moment with projects of 1 gigawatt, 1.5 gigawatts. We actually need to start looking at projects 10 gigawatts, 5 gigawatts, and we possibly need a number of rounds, further round Scotland. So we will see a Scotland 2 roughly in about 30 months' time. After Scotland is sorted out, the first one, we're looking at the next round. So the Scottish Government have already announced that they will have a further round 2 years after the completion of this one. So I'm saying 30 months roughly before we kick off another Scotland round, and we could see a further 10 gigawatts. The case that we're making to the Scottish Government at the moment is that we actually need to increase that ambition. If we're going to hit these project targets, 25 gigawatts by 2045, we need to actually increase our offshore wind ambition. And we need to start looking at dedicated hydrogen projects. So move away from electrical connections to shore, to the grid, and start thinking about dedicated offshore wind to hydrogen projects. And we need to up the scale of the projects. We need to start looking at a project scale of 5 to 10 gigawatts for one single project. Okay, it'll be phased, but we need to start thinking of that scale, and the industry would need to scale up to meet that. I think that sort of covers it. I'd like to hand over to John Sinclair. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought, and keep the questions coming in. Over to you, John.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Sinclair with Bilfinger. My role within Bilfinger is in business development in both onshore and offshore wind as part of their energy transition strategy. I was moving into the presentation. Taking into consideration the main reasons for members joining the subgroup that Neil highlighted in the previous presentation, which were access to projects, business development and unlocking regional and global opportunities, and unlocking funding. Specifically looking at the existing funding opportunities, we have put together this presentation to initially keep you informed and updated with regards to the potential funding calls that are being made available by governments for research and innovation associated with the development of hydrogen production. Next slide, please. For Scotland in December 2020, the Scottish Government released its hydrogen policy statement with policies that will focus on support for the development of a low-cost hydrogen capability to meet an initial ambition of generating 5 gigawatts of renewable and low-carbon hydrogen by 2030. With the vision for Scotland to become a leading hydrogen nation in the production of reliable, competitive, sustainable hydrogen and secure Scotland's future as an international excellence, as we establish the innovation skills and supply chain that will underpin our energy transition. Within the policy statement, it has introduced 100 million of funding support to boost research and innovation in the development and demonstration of secure, low-cost hydrogen production. This funding will kick off for the publication of the Scottish Hydrogen Action Plan in early spring this year, where thereafter there will be 20 million made available annually from the fund. The members of the subgroup need to be ready to participate and respond as required. Next slide, please. For the UK in November 2020, the UK Government Department for Business, Energy and Industry Strategy published its 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, where the second point was to drive the growth of low-carbon hydrogen by working alongside partners in industry with the aim for the UK to deliver 5 gigawatts of low-carbon hydrogen production capacity by 2030. That could see the UK benefit from around 8,000 jobs across our industry and beyond. Rita Wadey, who is the Deputy Director, Hydrogen Economy in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, leads on the development of the hydrogen strategy, including low-carbon hydrogen production. A Hydrogen Advisory Council was also formed in July 2020 with the purpose to inform about the development of hydrogen as a strategic decarbonised energy carrier for the UK. The Council consists of 20 advisors from the industry and academia where it's co-chaired by Shell and includes further deep wind members consisting of SSE, Ørsted, Equinor and BP. This driving the growth of a low carbon hydrogen reduction strategy is being supported by a range of measures, including a 240 million net zero hydrogen fund, and will set out in the spring this year the UK government's hydrogen business models and a revenue mechanism for them to be brought to the market through private sector investment. A recent report for the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy highlighted a key driver would be the introduction of a contracts for difference scheme for hydrogen with a suitable strike price. Again, the members of the subgroup need to be ready to participate and respond accordingly. Next slide, please. Another opportunity for funding is Horizon Europe. And this is an EU Commission proposal for a €100 billion research and innovation funding programme for 7 years, which runs from 2021 to 2027, with the aims of firstly to strengthen the EU scientific and technological basis, secondly to boost Europe's innovation capacity, competitiveness and jobs, and thirdly to deliver on citizens' priorities and sustain their social economic model and values. As can be seen from the table in this slide, it splits into 3 pillars, consisting of Pillar 1, excellent science, Pillar 2, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness, and Pillar 3, innovative Europe. The specific aims of and objectives and aims of the programme are firstly to support the creation and diffusion of high quality knowledge, secondly to strengthen the impact of research and innovation in supporting new EU policies, and thirdly to foster all forms of innovation and strengthen market deployment. Combining all 3 to optimise the programme delivery for wider participation and impact in a strengthened European research area. We would like to highlight that in Pillar 2 for global challenges and the European industrial competitiveness for climate, energy and mobility has been stipulated as key areas. €52.7 billion have been made available in the budget for this. So the first Horizon European calls will open in April 2021, but it's important to highlight that UK companies can lead bids. Within the numerous calls that are listed, there are opportunities in offshore wind, hydrogen and mesh calls. In wind alone, there's 13 calls presently. If you want more information about this, if you put Horizon Europe presentation into your web browsers, it takes you to a website and a presentation which fully informs you about the programme. Also, if you web browse Horizon 2020 Framework Programme, it takes you to the open and upcoming calls available in the programme. Next slide, please. The following are examples of some of the calls in the global challenges and European industrial competitiveness area, where the €52.7 billion is available in the budget. To go through a couple of them only as follows, you will see that one is on the next generation of renewable energy technologies, where a contribution per project of €3 million is available, and where the production of renewable hydrogen directly from renewable energy sources is within the scope of the topic. Another one is on the demonstration of innovative forms of storage and their successful operation and integration into innovative energy systems and grid infrastructure architecture, where a contribution per project of €8 to €9 million is available, and where you need to demonstrate technologies should include interfaces for connecting with existing infrastructure of hydraulic systems, for examples for hydraulic systems for innovative hydropower, or the use of natural gas storage sites for hydrogen, or biomethane storage, or abandoned infrastructure such as mines or storage solutions in direct central heating networks. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we develop opportunities to participate in these funding opportunities for research and innovation? Identified herein are some of the proposals and points that we and its members should consider for bidding into these calls and projects. Firstly, the creation of consortia and partnerships, which was a key result from the poll taken during the last webinar. Secondly, create special purpose vehicles or entities for taking forward collaborative projects. Thirdly, to consider how to bid into the EU calls, where we highlight that Deep Wind Developer Group represents 8 member states and 1 associated member, which should help with the EU calls and criteria. And finally, we should consider to use our collaborations with other European clusters like WAB in Germany, Norwegian Offshore Wind Cluster, and Wind OCC in France to form European partnerships. Thus, in closing, we would also welcome any other proposals from the membership so we can assist to maximise the opportunities for our members to assist this funding for research and innovation to secure Scotland's future as a centre of international excellence as we establish the innovation skills and supply chain that will underpin our energy transition. Thank you very much. That's me.
Thanks, John. Right, if you stay on and leave your camera on, and if Neil can join in. So we'll move to the discussion forum. There's some questions that have come in that we need to answer, but what we want you to do is be part of this discussion. If there's something that you think directly affects yourselves, your company, if there's something that you want to put in front of the subgroup, now's the chance. And any of the questions that we don't get to in this session, we will try to come back to you, possibly just follow up by email. Companies will be, let's say, reticent to talk about projects that they might have in mind, secrecy and IP and everything else. But if you do approach, if you contact myself as the cluster manager, we will keep whatever you tell us confidential and look to work with you on a way forward that suits what it is that you want to do and where you think the cluster subgroup can actually help. So that's the intention of this discussion. So I'm just going to have a look at an early question was to do with Neil mentioned the database. The question was, is there information available in the hydrogen supply chain database that Neil mentioned? Is this an ACA database or for the cluster? Actually, I think I can answer that. There is a body of work happening just now, which is coming out of the Scottish Offshore Wind Energy Council. They are funding a number of studies. They've joined up also with the hydrogen, Scottish Government's hydrogen group, and they are looking at delivering a mapping exercise for the supply chain, which was already underway and hopefully should be made public before, let's see, it'll either be the end of March or into April before that's in the public domain. But the intention is to map out all of the hydrogen supply chain in Scotland. So it will be a Scottish-wide database, not part of the cluster or, in fact, part of anybody else's database. It will be a national database that is being paid for, the work's been paid for by the Scottish Government. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. There's another question here. There's a huge challenge to and opportunity here for the Power2X members, 4 to 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production by 2030. Yet Dolphin is planning only a 10 megawatt demonstrator by 2027. According to your slides, how do we enable the scale up of projects and capabilities in order to meet these 2030 targets? So basically the question is, right, so far all that's on the horizon is a 10 megawatt demonstrator from ERM, talking about then scaling up to 100 beyond 2030. So how are we going to get anywhere near these targets? Right, so Neil, John, you want to have a go at answering that?
Yeah, I would interject that we have to keep our eye on Scotland as a big opportunity for us to reach our targets by 2030. I'm not working for Crown Estate, but from my analysis so far, there's going to be a lot of bids. I would imagine that has partly to do with the fact that they're delayed a little bit as well. So it'd be interesting to see on sites that aren't awarded what people will do, especially with the high tie-in prices that Paul mentioned earlier on, and the grid connection points higher up in Scotland. I do foresee hydrogen being scalable and cost competitive, especially with the local content restrictions in place. The adoption of hydrogen at scale in Scotland as part of potential Scotland opportunities could actually allow some investment and government support at quite a high scale as well. So I do think Scotland is, to cut it short, I suppose, I think Scotland will be an enabler for the large scale adoption of hydrogen.
Okay, just to back up, I think that obviously all the governments across the UK and Europe have obviously identified, that they need to make, contributions towards this, right? So I think that's a key player to make funding available for actually research and development. I also think the floating wind market has a big say in this too, because you're going to need floating wind to actually make it all happen. So overall, I think that I kind of hark back to the early offshore wind days in the early 2000s when everybody said that we couldn't do it and it would take time to happen, and it did happen. And I think that's just in the same situation here, is that people will need to take the opportunities to go out and find the funding to do the R&D, right? And then the supply chain will need to step up to the opportunities that are actually in the market. That's me.
Yeah, and the only thing, I suppose the only thing I would add to that is that there are other projects on the go at the moment which are not yet in the public domain. And this year, I think we're going to see a turning point in the scale of the projects coming forward. One that I should have mentioned, as I say, things are moving very rapidly. Scottish Power is instigating a very large project at, this is onshore at Whiteley, just outside of Glasgow, but they've just announced in the last week that they're working on a project at Nig, looking at using green hydrogen to decarbonise industrial processes at the port of Nig, and particularly related to offshore wind. So it's those kind of projects that are going to make the difference. We're beginning to hear about the scale up of the projects, but this, I think within this year, you're going to hear about some significant projects of scale that are just not on the radar at the minute. All right, now we have another question. Actually, Nick, do you want to ask your question? Let me try and unmute you. Sorry, I knew I shouldn't have tried this.
I think I can unmute myself. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. So Nick,
I think
you had a further question.
Yeah, I did, and thank you for answering the previous question I put in as well. I think there's a huge opportunity here, but also a huge challenge in scaling up from a supply chain point of view. Never mind, how are we going to use this hydrogen and how are we going to make it? One of the biggest challenges, certainly, that we've seen as a hydrogen integrator, hydrogen company based in Scotland, is that there just isn't the skilled workforce out there at the moment. And there's a huge challenge there, and the Scottish government talk a lot about the just transition away from oil and gas towards renewable energies and hydrogen. Should we be trying as a group to try and facilitate this shift away from those typical oil and gas skill sets towards more RE and hydrogen? And if so, how do we do that? I know there are some efforts going on from universities and stuff, but really it's about getting people in the companies and scaling up the companies, the private industry, as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks, Nick, for that. Is anybody wanting to take that one?
I think again, yeah, I agree that there is a skills shortage, but I think the people are there. They just need to be reskilled, you know. But it's also important to get, you know, educational institutions involved. And you know, I know in other regions of the UK, you know, basically companies are heavily involved with colleges and universities to make sure that the people coming through from a young age, you know, are ready for the potential opportunities. Right, I know it's happening in wind a great deal, and we're obviously going to need to look at, you know, make sure that we facilitate it for, you know, the hydrogen opportunities that are ahead of us too.
Neil, any thoughts on that yourself? Yeah, no, it's a difficult one, obviously, because we're a mature oil and gas sector. But there obviously we all know that there are there's an overlap with certain expertise. For instance, if we look at major EPC, for instance, there's a big overlap for oil and gas, in particular with floating structures, substructures, engineering, front end engineering. Where we struggle a little bit from my eyes is the OEM technology. Although companies such as GE, I know, have committed to manufacturing in the UK now, and there's a little bit, and because of the local content again, there's a bit more of a focus on development of skills in the UK, and the growth of jobs as well. But yeah, there is an overlap, but in particular the OEMs. So if we look at electrolyzers at scale, NEL for instance, and we look at manufacturing of wind turbines themselves, generally it's out of the EU. It's difficult to get that into the UK, but with local content, there is that hope that that we can grow the market for skills in the UK. But it's certainly something we'll take on board as a topic of focus for the subgroup as well, and see how we can progress.
Okay.
Add in just too is that presently with the decline in the oil and gas market, there is a large uptake just now of training that's being done for the offshore wind. The training providers are seeing a large uptake of people booking themselves on training courses to get them certified for the wind. So that does show that there is a workforce out there, and they're willing, and they're obviously also willing to actually retrain themselves till actually take up the opportunity.
Okay, I should also mention that I sit on the Scottish Offshore Wind Energy Council's skills subgroup. So it means that I work closely with Energy Skills Partnership and Skills Development Scotland. And besides looking at the energy transition skill sets, moving into wind and wind skill sets in general, they are also conscious that they need to look at hydrogen as well. So that body of work is sort of in the pipeline, and it's coming down the line. It's a recognition that we need to attend to that to follow the Scottish Government's ambition, very large ambition in this space. We need the skill sets to match. So it is recognised, and there are steps being taken to make sure that we're going to be ready to deliver when we need to deliver. Okay, so I'll move on to, now we're running out of time, so I'll try to be as quick as possible on the other questions. I've got a question here saying, do we expect ScotWind to raise the total of lease power of part of, sorry, I'm not quite sure what the question is there. Do we expect ScotWind to raise the total of lease power as part of this? And it looks as if it was not finished. If somebody wants to put that question in, I'll attempt it again, but I'll move on to the next one. So someone's pointed out that they've had plans for hydrogen production, but every time we try to gain info on how we can access wind generated power, no one seems to know. Any pointers, please? Well, I think the first pointer is contact me. Tell me what it is that you want to do, where you want to do it, If it's onshore wind you're looking for, we could probably even point in the right direction. There is a database that gives the whole of the UK's onshore wind players, where they are, coordinates everything. So if you're in a particular part of Scotland or somewhere in the UK, we can probably point in the right direction. If it's offshore wind that you're looking for, and of course we need to be talking about scale if we're talking about offshore wind, we can help you with that as well, because as I think I might have not mentioned earlier, in the Deep Wind cluster, our developer group has every single asset owner in the UK, including assets that are yet to be built. They have the leaseholders. So every single project in the UK in offshore wind, our developer group is responsible for it. So if we can't help you, nobody can, put it that way. So do contact me, Paul O'Brien. So it's paul.o'brien with an E at hient.co.uk. I'll put that into the chat as well for anybody that wants to contact me. Now, I think that's, other than there's a comment more than answers, but I will flag this up. So a study was undertaken in 2018. Thanks to Louise for flagging this up. A study undertaken in 2018 by Pale Blue Dot, who are the company behind the Acorn project, or one of the companies behind the Acorn project, but the original lead. They're flagged up that there was a report done for Aberdeen City Council on supply chain, and Louise has kindly given us a link to it, and I will try to, no, I can't copy that across, but we'll make that available in the follow-up so that anybody that wants to look at that can do. As this webinar is being recorded, of course, it will be available on our Offshore Wind Scotland website, along with a copy of the presentation, and companies that want to see the links and such, we will include them in that snippet on the website, including that. And as I say, I will attempt to put my, bear with me a sec, if anybody wants to contact me directly to discuss anything that was done today, I'll just send that to the entire audience. So that's my contact details there. So the company that's looking for wind power, I think you're talking to the right people. Give me a shout and we'll see if we can link you up with somebody that can help you out, because that really is what the cluster is all about, and what we're trying to do for all of our members. Now, I think that's us. We've only got a couple of minutes to go. So what I would just ask is, if John, do you want to say any last comments before we wrap this up? And the same for Neil.
Yeah, I mentioned a couple of web links that wasn't actually on the presentation. We'll add that into the presentation to basically show the links into their Horizon Europe funding. That's all I've really got to say.
Okay. Any last words, Neil?
Nothing other from me. Just thanks to everyone for coming. And if you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar as well.
Okay. Right. Well, I'd just like to thank the two co-chairs for presenting today and answering the questions. And of course, I'd like to thank yourselves for taking part. We want this to be a dialogue, so please use my email address to come back to us with anything that you've heard today that you want to comment on, or anything you want to ask about. Drop me an email and we'll get back to you on it. So thanks very much for taking part, and hope to see you all again at the next Power2X webinar, which will be sometime, we're coming back to you very shortly with when that will be, sometime in the future. So thanks again, and thanks everyone for taking part. Bye for now.